So welcome to Rugby Special. I'm joined in the studio today by John Barclay and Sam Warburton. Player welfare is always a massive hot topic in rugby. So I wanted to ask you guys, how has the game changed in terms of player welfare, its preparation, and how the coaches manage their players, Sam?
I think it's changed quite a lot. I was chatting to one of the boys who was recently in the Wales squad, and he was there throughout my whole tenure. I'm being cryptic, George North. And, just say it. And I remember he said, he's like, the environment's very different to when we used to be in there. We're talking about we're old boys, but 10 years now is some time has moved on. Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? I think the way coaches speak to players now, they admit themselves is very different. I think you could be way more direct with players, very harsh in some of your feedback and quite critical, which I actually I prefer that. I quite like direct feedback. And then I think training as well. I think the game is moving on all the time. High-speed meters go up, GPS is going up, collisions are going up, players are getting fitter and more powerful. And I think some coaches are still training or trying to train as hard as they used to. But if the game's going up in intensity, something has to give. You can't just keep filling up both buckets, training and the game. Something's got to give. And I think that's probably what we saw, a quick fix, I think, from Wales, was they probably freshened the guys up massively in the training week, and you saw more output on the field. So I think training has to be carefully moderated, much more than it used to be. And I think you've got to be way more careful on your feedback to players compared to maybe 5-10 years ago.
Give us an example of some of that tough love or that tough feedback that you'd have got.
Well, there's a certain high-profile defence coach I had who I think is exceptional. I'll never say it, Sean Edwards. But I'm sure he's probably started this now, but you go down to team room, and I love this, by the way, because I think that accountability it creates is really good. You need that. And players would be ranked from you'd be up from 1 to 23 as a squad, and your individual feedback was up on a massive overhead projector going out to a huge screen for the whole squad to see. And if you had a bad game, it would be like, poor game, never do this again. And it would, it was, but if you were good, it was great. Everyone saw you were great. So that feedback was really direct, but I thought I loved it. And we actually all really craved it, because I remember being in the defensive line for Wales thinking, Sean's going to be watching this. Yeah. If I don't get into shape quick, I'm going to get called out for this. So I got into shape, So, but I think that now is probably, Sean would probably admit himself, you have to move the times a bit, and maybe you can't do things as probably quite directly and bluntly as you did.
Johnny, you'd have had loads of that.
We had Vern Cotter.
Okay.
Kiwi
softly
coach.
Spoken.
Very softly spoken. Vern was the only coach I ever had that if he said good morning to you, you didn't know what the right answer was. And he would do the same. He was of that old school, a spade's a spade, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. If you played badly, training was going to be a direct reflection of that. And you talk about training load, and you talk about maybe the shared leadership models you see now with players and coaches. Even that was only going back maybe 8-10 years. That was his team. Do what he says. Everything was run by his way, and I was kind of similar. I quite liked it. Yeah, I quite liked the fact because you knew exactly where you stood. I think there's an element of now which is it probably wouldn't have gone down well. Then you see players allowed to be a bit more individuals now and have bigger characters in around. You see it in team meetings now, don't you? There's a bit more of laughter and jokes, and the way they start meetings, they make meetings a bit more vibrant, a bit more energetic. How do you have a bit of a laugh with it because it's serious, but I think, somewhere in the middle is probably the right place.
Yeah, fair play. I used to love going into those team meetings. To your point, that sense of accountability. You would go into a team meeting, 7-foot projector screen, and if you were rubbish, the coach is going to tell you rubbish in front of all your players. You're not going to do it again. You change your behaviours, you change your attitude, and you don't let your teammates down. Do you know what I mean?
Just remembering something like that.
Tell us. Please tell me.
We got beat. I don't know who it was back then. And
Wales.
we beat them then. It was, I don't know who, and it's not important to the story, and we played really poorly, and it was Andy Robinson. He was old school as well. Yeah. He made us, he would put clips up, and he'd say, player watch this player. I remember it was Graham Morrison, who was one of my best mates. He'd player watch him. So we all sat there watching. He said, play it back again and tell him what you think. And I was like, that wasn't very good. And he was like, no, tell him. So I had to talk him through everything he did wrong in a 3-minute sequence. To my best mate sat beside me. We still laugh about it to this day.
But do you think players' personalities have changed, which means the coaches had to change? I mean, last year there was loads made about Eddie Jones and perhaps how he managed that England team during that period. Danny Care's written a book and made loads of money from that book, actually. Never complained when he was within the squads. However, Do you think the players' personalities have changed and and you have to be a bit more gentle in the feedback?
100%. And look, I've talked about this in rugby, and business owners around the place all say the same thing. You know, people who are in their young 20s now are a lot more probably outspoken and confident and forthright in what they think than they used to be maybe when we come through, when you keep your head down until you're mid-20s, and then you might think, OK, I feel, senior enough, I can probably speak. I think the landscape's changed, maybe not just in rugby. I think it's in the world and the normal
Business
workplace
thing, yeah.
as well. Yeah.
If I say the word Poland to you, what would that mean to you,
God.
Sam? Explain.
Oh,
He's
anybody...
pretending he didn't love it. It's a training camp for a week.
Yeah, I like the weights. I like the weights. They're like, oh my goodness, like that was brutal. I remember
Because Wales used to go there, didn't they?
Yeah, we went there for about 3 camps, and there was one time. I always wonder whether this would happen now. There's a time we were like on the beach, and it was like minus something degrees. We're all in like 4 or 5 layers, hats, gloves, everything, and we're like commando crawling on the beach, then getting up and running, and then doing tackling, and then
soft.
So but back then it was like no one else is doing this, you know.
For a reason.
And everyone else like, no, we're not. No, but I wonder if that happened now. I don't know if players would tolerate that kind of training anymore. I think they want more. Not more. There was science behind it, obviously, but they're like, no, that's. I think they would.
Yeah, we used to sort of go to you would have done marine camps and army camp. We went up to Font-Romeu and trained at altitude before 2019 World Cup, 2015 World Cup, and they just put us on a mountain in like shorts and t-shirts overnight and camped.
Genuine.
And yet then we found out after being at altitude for a week, you have to be there for 2 weeks to get the benefit. So you're like,
You've got some nice photos.
because no, cameras are banned.
Honestly, we had a training camp. We were in Doha, so it was for heat training. And we turned up to the pitch, and there was always been ambulance on the side of the pitch because they wanted to push us right to that edge. And there was one player, I can't say who he is, right? But he was a front rower. So like he was, let's say he was. From a gravitational perspective, he was challenged. He was a heavier lad. And we were doing a fitness session. And mate, he was, like, when the session finished, there was no extras. You had to just get off that pitch. It was so hot. But we did this one fitness session, which took him over the edge. I remember going to the changing room after, which was just next to the pitch. And he was lying there with ice towels on him, like this, flat out on his back with an oxygen mask.
Samson Lee?
No, it wasn't Samson Lee.
Adam Jones?
No.
Gethin Jenkins?
No. To be continued.
OK, to be continued. I tell you what, it's never a great thought when you turn up to train and they've got an ambulance on the side of the
And
pitch.
a player with oxygen,
Yeah,
in ice towels or anything, and they are pushing us to the edge. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I do remember one of my first days of pre-season, and obviously they just want to get loads of metres in your legs and get a good baseline fitness, but they got us to the try-line, and we thought, we're just going to do 100-metre sprints. It was everyone lie down on your front. And we bear crawled 100 metres. So bear crawling is laying prone, flat, and you're not allowed to lift your bum into the air, and you had to drag your body. And so by the end of it, no skin on your elbows, no skin on your thighs, and then you went into contact. It took 3 weeks to recover, do you know what I mean, from all of that. So it has changed for the better. But on a serious note, and just to bring it full circle now, if you can't control what happens on the pitch, the game is the game. OK? And we do everything we can to protect them. How can we protect players better in training? Is that by limiting contact? What would be your suggestion, John?
Yeah, I pushed this for when I played, to be honest. I didn't do it. My shoulders were wrecked, my wrist was wrecked, and I couldn't have a good relationship with Wayne Pivac when I was at Scarlets. And I said, look, if you want me to play, I can't do this volume of training because I'll be unable to perform at the weekend. And I think the way the game's played now, the speed of collisions, the speed of the game, I think now you're asking a lot of players to then do that in training as well. And the days of potentially, really we used to have big physical sessions, which would, they'd be long sessions, live, jackling, tackling, mauling, pick and go. I think there's got to be a way to bring that load down. If you want players to have long careers, and which we do, we want players to play for as long as they can at the top level. And I think that's where it's very hard because the counter side that how do you get better at it? How do you make yourself safe on the pitch if you don't practice it? Yeah. And I think that's a pretty poor excuse. You've got to find a way to do it. And you see a lot in England, put a lot of stuff on their socials, doing on mats and using pads and bags. And I think more of that, the better. I think the players are so well adjusted now, so quick to respond to law changes, to changes from what coaches want from them. Actually, as long as you put in the pitch, I think training has to be modified to reflect that.
And we want to see the best of players on Saturday. Sam, the game's never stressed the players more. Contacts, collision, high-speed meters and everything else. But would it be fair to say that the game's perhaps never been safer?
I think the media don't do a good enough role in actually trying to promote the safety of rugby, because obviously the natural clickbait that you want from head injuries is an obvious one. But I think I've always said this: if boxing had the same protocols as rugby, most heavyweight fights wouldn't go beyond 2 or 3 rounds, just be called off. If you've shown one concussive symptom, which is I think 1 of 14 or 1 of 12, that's like dizziness, loss of speech, nausea, all these different symptoms. Being concussed doesn't mean being knocked out. It means it could be a load of things. Boxing, if they followed our protocols, mate, boxing would almost be dead. I think rugby is very progressive in the money they spent. You know this from your work with World Rugby. The money they spent on research and the due diligence they do to make sure that players remain as healthy as possible. I'm actually very reassured by the work. And also at grassroots level, like, that's the big problem we have with it. The ripple effect of this negative press goes down to grassroots level. Grassroots level, rugby, statistically now, this is not anecdotal, statistically is very, very safe. But because of the image that certain outlets like to give it, it wrecks our participation. It's a great sport to play at young level. It's only at the very, very top of the game it needs to get policed well, and I think it does get policed well now. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that now. I do think it does.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's fair to say in the time that we all played rugby, rugby's in a far better place now.